Hello everybody, this is Eli. Welcome back to Elfbait, and today I want to talk about how to GM soft skills. So RPGs are kind of weird in a way. You know, we have all of these rules for combat, there's a lot of mechanics for it, and then we have attributes for our characters that make them amazing, sometimes horrible. And then we have skills that allow them to do things that are certainly related to their careers or just things they picked up. Now, the weird kind of disjoint in most RPGs is that it is not so much in the rules. See, most RPGs are combat heavy, you know, at least as far as the adventure-y kind. There are some that are more skill heavy, but where the breakdown really comes down is not so much in the rules themselves, it's the expectations of players and DMs. So, nobody argues the fact that you roll dice to hit the monster. Nobody argues that you roll dice to determine the damage of your spell. It is also acceptable that dice are going to get rolled when you're trying to do a specific task, but where often there seems to be some conflict is the perception of how dice, or if dice should even be used, when you're dealing with social interactions, puzzles, and soft skill sets. The intelligence of a wizard is often, for example, is often well in excess of the person playing it. Now, the funny thing is often the strength of a fighter is well in excess of the person playing it, and their combat ability is often in excess of the abilities of the person playing them. I certainly can't cast any spells, and I don't have hypersenses like an elf or anything like that. I can't detect traps and stone passages and stuff like that. But nobody, I won't say nobody, but generally speaking, people accept that that's just something you roll dice for. However, if you're going through a dungeon and you find a puzzle and you want to roll dice for it, there's a sudden break. Many players and GMs look at this as something that is bad. It is role-playing instead of role-playing. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. I think really you are certainly doing yourself a disservice if you don't engage in the fun of trying to play that out, trying to solve that puzzle on your own, trying to really talk your way through that encounter with that lord or that dragon or whatever. But what I don't understand though is that certainly is the opposition to rolling dice in those situations. It comes back to player capabilities and player experience and types of role players, types of gamers. Not everybody who plays an RPG is this polymath who just absorbs everything and just is always sucking up knowledge and trivia and stuff like that. Not everybody is like that. Just like not everybody is a marathon runner. Certainly, I'm not expecting you to out sword fight me when we're in combat. So when it comes down to being a GM and coming up with puzzles for characters, or for the characters to solve, I do tend to be very, permissive when it comes to using intelligence or skill sets. So there are a few ways to approach this. First of all, number one, I always suggest letting people, encouraging players to role play through a soft skill encounter. It is better for everybody. Everybody's having a better time when that happens, and certainly the game is gonna come out on top for that. Now that said, when they get stuck, that's when I would say allow for skill checks. Or if it is just really outside their wheelhouse, and you really, and they want to do this, just let them roll for it. I would ask them to still at least say how they're doing it, or kind of narrate this. But again, it comes down to role players and role playing and stuff, and how well they can do it. Nobody wants to sit around a table while everybody hems and haws and eventually, can't figure out the puzzle. It just doesn't do anybody any good. But you can go ahead and have fun by allowing your players to roll for clues, use alternate skills, and also as a GM, I always like to keep a sort of a backup up my sleeve. Sort of what is... So plan A, of course, would be to solve the puzzle at the door. Plan B could be to bash the door down. But I always like to have some sort of contingency. So yes, the players can choose to bypass the encounter or the puzzle or the soft skill test, but there's going to be some sort of consequence. If you bash down the door, maybe the doorway collapses behind you, and so you will have a hard time going back that direction. Or it could be you bash down the door, you've now alerted the guards. You've bashed down the door and you've triggered some sort of secondary defense, and now the DC for traps and stuff might be harder. In social engagements, you also have to keep this in mind. Not everybody is an orator, and not everybody is well spoken, and even the most well spoken person can find themselves flat-footed when they're put into a situation they didn't have a chance to prep for. And so in those situations where your characters are facing off against, say, a lord, and they have to actually convince that lord of something, or maybe they're having to talk their way out of getting eaten by that dragon, they may just not have... They may not be up to the task that night. Maybe maybe the guy who does all the talking in your party isn't there that night. Maybe the guy who does all the talking and is usually the go-to guy is just had an off day, long day at work. He's just fried, and he's just not able to function at the highest level he would, because he got 3 hours sleep, or the new baby's keeping him up, whatever. Allow them to pull out the intimidation dice, the persuasion dice. That's what they're there for. They're in the system. Don't shame or deride your players because they want to fall back on the dice to do stuff. I would certainly reward them for figuring it out themselves. In my games, I often give out role-playing bonuses. Now, 5th edition has inspiration in the system, and so you could easily throw out an inspiration die if somebody was particularly good. But I do like to allow for... I just kind of fall back on my time-honored role-playing bonus XP, and that's usually 25, 50, and even 100, depending on how much they participated for that session or that adventure. It depends on how frequently I give it out. If somebody's really contributing and doing a lot of role-playing, even if it's not necessarily heavy result-based, I'll still give them a role-playing bonus. I like to encourage role-playing first. But I'm not adverse to somebody wanting to roll a die. I'm never going to shame somebody because they want to roll intimidation instead of giving me a really, show me your war face. Grr. It's not everybody's like that. Not everybody is a puzzle master, and not everybody is research guy. Nobody's going to bat an eye when the wizard wants to make an Arcana check, because none of us have any experience tooling through magic libraries. There may be a few folks out there, and if you do, awesome. Tell me how you did it, and I certainly want to try too. But research is something that we might have experience doing, and so role-playing the bare bones of research is certainly something you can describe that your character or your wizard is going to spend hours poring through the volumes looking for specific things. So that also brings me to kind of another point. When you are going to let your players dice for results, make sure that they are telling you a specific result that they are going for. Dicing for general results, general success, is lame. I don't like it. It adds too much ambiguity, and as a GM, it makes it really hard for me to feel like I'm giving out an appropriate result to your die roll. If you want to say, I'm going to go research fairies, and you're looking for a specific piece of information, don't expect me to volunteer that. I feel like that's kind of fishing on the player's part. You go and make a research check, and you're going to roll research fairies, but you're not, and you know that you're looking for some piece of information, but you're not going to ask specifically for it. I'm going to ask the player to focus a bit. What exactly you're looking for? Are you looking for some sort of specific information? Is there some specific instance you're looking for? And you might even have to narrow it down there. I'm looking for information on fairies stealing babies. Okay, well, that's a pretty common thing that fairies do. Are you looking for local tales? Are you looking for results? Are you looking for what this could lead to? Because honestly, if you're asking a very general result, first of all, it's going to take you a lot of time because you're going to be researching a whole crap ton of stuff. But also, you're still fishing. You may have narrowed it down some, but you're still really not giving me as a GM much to work with. And so I'm going to ask, and I feel that you should then ask the player to narrow it down a bit. A die roll should never be applied to large chunks of information. Now, if you were to say, I'm looking for information on times when fairies have stolen babies and the babies have been returned and what that means, and you make your check, I know what to tell you. I can then tell you, okay, well, you found a little bit of information on some things that have been 2 or 3 results where in some cases the children were fine, in some cases they had odd details about them, things that weren't quite right. I can give you a little bit more information. I don't feel like I'm giving away the farm as a GM. So as a GM, you certainly want to go ahead and make sure that when the players are going to resort to dice for soft skills, that they are going for a specific action or a specific result. Now, it's easy to do when you're solving the puzzle. I want to solve the puzzle. But you know what? Puzzles, and it's unfortunate that it's not in 5th edition. 4th edition, if it did one thing right, it was to create the skill challenge. Skill challenges are a great way to allow players to dice soft skills or dice puzzles, but not necessarily give them a pass-fail. So, for example, let's say you had a puzzle lock on a door, and you put a skill challenge out there. You could have it to where every success was 1 notch closer to getting it done, and that was a step towards figuring it out. But every failure was some sort of setback. It could be that if you wanted to make it a trapped door, each failure might have caused an effect to the trap, or maybe every time there's a failure, there's a percentage chance the trap will fail. I like to think of that scene in Goonies when they're at the pipe organ and they're trying to figure out the tune, and every time they hit a wrong key, part of the floor falls out. That's a good way to handle those skill sets, and if you're actually allowing the players to dice it. So, okay, I'm going to make a performance check, roll. Oh, you failed. Okay, part of the floor fell out. I'm going to try a performance again. Oh, you failed again. More of the floor is falling out. Now you've got just the floor under you. All right, so then maybe they succeed or fail. And, if they fail, they fall, but chances are, if you're a good DM, you're not necessarily looking to kill them. You're just looking to deter them. But I really cringe when I hear people just frothing over the idea of letting people dice through soft skill sets. I've had people even tell me, why bother playing role-playing games if you're not going to do that? It is a game. We are there to have fun. People have different levels of ability. You have to be willing to accept that. You don't just kick somebody away from the table because they aren't a good role player. You don't and so certainly you shouldn't kick somebody away from the table because they're not good at puzzles, and you shouldn't kick somebody away from the table because they're not a diplomat, and you shouldn't kick somebody away from the table because they're not a good performer. Again, nobody bats an eye when somebody wants to roll dice for combat, or when somebody wants to roll dice to use strength to hold up the door, and nobody actually freaks out when somebody wants to roll a dexterity check to avoid a trap. we don't expect players to get up from the table and then lift a heavy weight. We don't expect them to beat the DM in a sword fight. And we don't expect them to dodge, a lawn dart. But we do, so for some reason, expect people to go ahead and think and do things cerebrally that they may not be any better prepared to do. Don't give away the farm. Make them work for it. Make the skill challenge or the skill roll part of the role play. Have them role play out what they're doing, and then let them roll the dice if they can't get it. It's easy to do, and in the end, everybody will have fun. You'll have your adventure. Anyways, that is my take on handling soft skill challenges in RPGs, and really getting away from this idea that if you're not playing out the soft stuff, that you're somehow failing. How do you guys handle it? Comment below. Do you have particular systems or tricks that you use to try and get people to do it? Do you like to throw out clues? Do you have systems of your, do you have sub games? Do you reduce it to some sort of physical thing, like a card draw or something like that? Go ahead and comment below. Let me know how you handle it. You can find me on Facebook at Elfbait. There's a Facebook group for Elfbait. You can find me on Twitter. I am Elfbait there. There's an Elfbait email as well. That is baittheelf@gmail.com. And like, share, subscribe. Get the channel out there. But as always, the most important thing is to get out and game. Take care.